At 80 years old, Michael Douglas is no longer trying to protect an image or impress the world. Time has slowly taken away the need to pretend, and in its place, it has given him honesty. When people look at his life from the outside, they often see awards, red carpets, powerful roles, and a marriage that once looked like a Hollywood dream. But behind that polished surface lived a far quieter and heavier truth, one that had nothing to do with scandal or betrayal. It was the truth of pressure, fear, illness, and emotional exhaustion that fame never shows. Michael has spoken over the years about how success did not protect him from suffering. There were nights when money meant nothing, when applause faded, and when the silence inside his own home felt louder than any crowd. Standing beside him during many of those moments was Catherine Zeta-Jones, not as a perfect symbol of beauty, but as a human being fighting her own internal battles. Their marriage was not a story of villains or victims. It was the story of two people trying to survive under the weight of expectations that no relationship is truly prepared to carry. From the beginning, the world placed them on a pedestal. He was the experienced Hollywood legend. She was the rising star, admired for her talent, elegance, and strength. Cameras followed them everywhere, and every public appearance fed the idea that their life together was flawless. But fame has a way of creating distance, even when two people love each other deeply. In the early years of their marriage, work pulled them in opposite directions. Michael spent long stretches in the United States, balancing acting, producing, and responsibilities from a life he had built long before Catherine entered it. Catherine, meanwhile, was often in Europe, filming major projects, winning awards, and rising faster than almost anyone expected. At first, the distance felt manageable. Phone calls, messages, and quick reunions kept the connection alive. But over time, weeks apart turned into emotional gaps. Conversations grew shorter. Small doubts quietly took root. Catherine was younger and stepping into global fame, while Michael was aware that age was slowly changing how the industry saw him. He loved her success, but he also felt the quiet fear of becoming the older partner standing beside a woman whose star was still climbing. Catherine carried her own fears as well. Michael had lived a very public life before her, known for relationships that the world never forgot. Even though he had changed and committed to their marriage, the shadow of his past never fully disappeared. There were moments when insecurity surfaced, not as anger, but as quiet questions spoken late at night. These were not fights meant to hurt. They were fears born from pressure, distance, and the impossible standard of being watched by the entire world. Neither of them wanted to admit how heavy it all felt. From the outside, everything still looked perfect. Inside, they were learning an early truth that many couples discover but few talk about openly. Love does not erase insecurity, and fame does not make emotional struggles disappear. It often makes them worse. Still, they moved forward, raising their children, attending events, and presenting a united front. They believed that strength meant endurance, and endurance meant silence. Michael, especially, had learned over decades in Hollywood to ignore discomfort. Pain was something you worked through, not something you stopped for. That habit would follow him into the most difficult chapter of his life, one that would change not only his body, but his understanding of marriage, vulnerability, and survival. By the time the late 2000s arrived, Michael Douglas had grown used to pushing past warning signs. A sore throat lingered longer than it should have. Fatigue became part of daily life. He blamed long flights, late nights, and the natural cost of a demanding career. Like many people, he assumed that rest would fix it, that slowing down was optional. But when the diagnosis finally came, it shattered every assumption he had made. Stage 4 throat cancer is not a condition you explain away. It forces a person to confront their own mortality with no room for denial. In that moment, Fame, wealth, and decades of success meant nothing. Michael has recalled how clearly he remembers the doctor's words, not because of fear for himself, but because of what those words meant for his family. He did not fear dying as much as he feared what dying would do to his children and to Catherine. Coming home after hearing the diagnosis, he stood quietly and watched Catherine playing with their children, unaware that the ground beneath their lives had already shifted. He tried to memorize the scene, the sound of laughter, the warmth of the afternoon light, because he did not know how much time he had left. Telling Catherine was one of the hardest moments of his life. Her reaction was not dramatic, but it was heavy. She cried, not only from fear of loss, but from the sudden understanding of the responsibility that had fallen on her shoulders. She knew the world would watch every step she took. She knew the press would analyze her strength, her weakness, her ability to hold everything together. At the same time, she was already managing her own mental health struggles, including bipolar disorder, which can resurface with intense emotional shock. The illness Michael faced did not exist in isolation. It collided directly with Catherine's internal battles, creating a situation where both partners were fighting separate wars under the same roof. Treatment began, and life quickly narrowed into hospital rooms, medical schedules, and long hours of waiting. Michael's body weakened in ways he had never experienced. His voice changed. His energy disappeared. Simple movements became difficult. The man who once commanded sets and studios now needed help walking short distances. Catherine stayed with him through treatments, holding his hand, sitting beside him as he drifted in and out of exhaustion. Her support was real and constant, but so was her struggle. There were days when she could offer strength and reassurance, whispering that they would survive this together. And there were days when fear overwhelmed her completely, forcing her to retreat, not out of lack of love, but out of emotional survival. This is where their marriage entered its quietest and most painful phase, not marked by arguments or betrayal, but by silence and separation that existed even while they were in the same room. Michael later reflected that the darkest realization was not the possibility of death. It was the understanding that he and Catherine were suffering alone, each trapped in their own private terror. He could not protect her from her illness. She could not heal him from his cancer. Love was present, but it was no longer enough to fix everything. This period taught Michael something he had never fully understood before. The true challenges of marriage are not dramatic explosions that outsiders imagine. They are the long, silent hours when two people love each other deeply but are powerless to save one another. Fame only amplified this reality. Every public appearance required strength they barely had. Every headline ignored the exhaustion behind their eyes. Catherine faced intense scrutiny, judged not only as an actress, but as a wife expected to be endlessly strong. Michael carried guilt, feeling that his illness had added unbearable weight to someone who was already struggling. There were moments when both wondered how much more they could endure. And yet, they continued, not because it was easy, but because walking away from shared pain felt harder than facing it together. Survival became their goal, not perfection. This chapter stripped away illusions, forcing them to see marriage, not as a fairy tale, but as a test of endurance, compassion, and acceptance of human limits. Looking back now, Michael Douglas does not describe his marriage as a tragedy or a mistake. He describes it as real. At 80, he speaks with the clarity of someone who has survived both physical illness and emotional reckoning. He understands that the world often wants simple stories, heroes and villains, success and failure. But life, especially marriage, does not work that way. What he learned through illness and recovery was that love does not mean always being strong. Sometimes it means accepting weakness, both in yourself and in the person beside you. As his health slowly improved and treatment ended, the scars remained, not only on his body, but on how he viewed life. Catherine continued her own journey, seeking treatment, stepping back when necessary, and learning to manage her mental health with greater care. Their relationship did not return to the image it once had, and that was not a loss. It was growth. They had seen each other at their most vulnerable, stripped of glamour and illusion. Michael often reflects on how fame once defined success for him. Awards, recognition, and admiration felt like proof of worth. But illness taught him that survival, presence, and honesty mattered more than any trophy. Marriage, he learned, is not about constant happiness. It is about endurance through seasons that do not look beautiful from the outside. He no longer speaks in terms of horror, as shock or blame. Instead, he uses the word to describe the quiet truth many couples face but rarely admit. That sometimes, two people can love each other and still hurt deeply. Sometimes, the greatest pain comes not from conflict, but from watching someone you love suffer while knowing you cannot fix it. This realization changed how Michael spoke about relationships, aging, and legacy. At 80, he does not pretend to have all the answers. He acknowledges mistakes, fears, and moments of emotional distance. But he also acknowledges survival. He and Catherine did not survive because they were perfect. They survived because they accepted imperfection. They learned that asking for help is not weakness, that stepping back is not abandonment, that silence can be part of healing when words fail. For viewers looking in from the outside, their story offers something deeper than gossip. It offers reflection. It reminds us that behind every polished image is a human story filled with fear, doubt, and resilience. Michael Douglas's journey is not a warning against marriage, nor an accusation against his wife. It is a reminder that even the most admired lives are fragile, that love does not cancel pain, but it can exist beside it, and that the true measure of a relationship is not how it looks when everything is easy, but how it survives when everything falls apart. At 80, Michael no longer tries to hide these truths, not to shock the world, but to speak honestly about what it means to live, to love, and to endure. His story does not ask us to gasp, it asks us to understand. Michael Douglas, one of Hollywood's most respected actors, had faced some of life's toughest challenges by the time he turned 80. He had built a long career full of iconic roles, fame, and public recognition. He had also survived cancer, a disease that not only threatened his life, but forced him to slow down and reconsider everything he held important. By 2013, Michael had beaten cancer, a victory that should have been celebrated as a turning point in his life. Yet survival brought with it unexpected challenges, especially in his marriage to Catherine Zeta-Jones. While the outside world saw a glamorous couple walking red carpets, smiling for the cameras, and attending movie premieres hand in hand, the truth behind closed doors was far more complicated. The public had no way of knowing the tension, the quiet moments of despair, or the emotional distance that had grown between them during his illness. For Michael and Catherine, the years of fighting personal battles had created a strain that was almost invisible to outsiders, but deeply felt by both of them. Catherine Zeta-Jones, known for her charm and grace, had been dealing with her own emotional struggles. Her bipolar disorder had sometimes made everyday life more challenging, and during Michael's cancer treatment, her own condition intensified. Meanwhile, Michael had struggled with depression after his recovery. The combination of illness, emotional strain, and the pressures of fame created a space in their home where both felt isolated. They were physically together, living under the same roof, but emotionally they were drifting apart. Nights that had once been filled with whispered promises, laughter, and closeness became silent. They would lie awake, staring at the darkness, wondering what had happened to the partnership they had once relied on so completely. It was not dramatic shouting or constant fighting that marked the breaking point, but rather a quiet, slow erosion of intimacy and communication. One evening in August 2013, Michael came home to find Catherine packing a suitcase.